What's going on, y'all? I'm Bud Elliott. That's Danny Cannell. That's Tom Fernelli. Where's Chip Patterson?
You know what he's out doing?
What's he
I think he's out getting like a makeover for our big national television debut tomorrow on CBS Sports Network. He's getting like, some maybe a little fillers, some Botox, getting his nails done, haircut, so he gets all ready to go. That's right. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., little different time, Cover 3 podcast, national television, CBS Sports Network, the entire hour. So we'll all be very TV ready.
I think it's great that you both get the plug in and you cover for Chip, who's actually still in the drunk tank after spending last night celebrating Duke's trip to the Sweet 16. He got a little too rowdy. He's in jail again, but we think he'll be back in time for the show.
Pretty solid weekend of college basketball for us. I'm bandwagoning with the Illini with Tom. Danny gets like the CBS crew is shouting out Danny's golf game on national television because he's there. Rooting for his nephew or cousin? Nephew, right?
Nephew. Yeah, my sister's son, Ben Middlebrooks, represent for him. It's funny because I didn't know if they were going to do anything, but Steve Lapis was on the call. We've done a golf trip with him, and I've played with him before, and I think he was begging about strokes then, and it sounded like he was begging on the broadcast, saying he needs more strokes too. So, hey, some things never change. People always asking for more strokes.
Having won the Citrus Bowl Classic scramble mainly because Mr. Cannell hit like 2 30 or 40 foot eagle bombs. You need to be giving that guy some strokes, dude, for sure. Oh gosh. So without Chip here, we were like, oh damn, we got to make a rundown, and I kind of just put together stuff that people were talking about and emptied the spring notebook. We'll start football. We'll talk a little hoops. The one thing I did kind of want to get to because it's quarterback news. It's Notre Dame quarterback news. Riley Leonard undergoes a second or additional surgery to replace the plate that he had from his ankle injury last year. Timetable sort of uncertain. Marcus Freeman seemed to imply that there is some chance he could return for some spring activities during spring football. They're currently going through that right now. What's our level of concern? We're not doctors, but like I saw this, like, ooh, I'm keeping an eye on this.
I think it's a big concern. If you're Notre Dame, so there's a couple issues here. One, depth behind Riley Leonard. Like, what do they do if, God forbid, anything happens and he's not ready week 1? But even if you do, even if it's just, okay, we have Riley Leonard, he's our guy, we're rolling forward with him. What happens if he isn't 100% or he's impacted in his mobility? Because as we discussed last year when he was at Duke, that's what set him apart. Like, he was a special runner of the football, and his passing needed work. And it still does. That was something he even acknowledged, because I had talked to Dusty about it, who did their game against Clemson when they won. That was the breakout win for him, breakout story. And it was a big part. They even mentioned in the broadcast, his arm, top tier arm strength, and just overall consistency as a passer was something that needed to improve. So we don't know really if he's improved as a passer. You would hope he would, but he's in a new system. And then the part that you're going to rely on, which really makes him dynamic, is his mobility. How is that impacted? Already coming off of 1 surgery, now dealing with 2. I think it's concerning for Notre Dame. Of course, we hope he makes full recovery. Sometimes in medicine, you see it's not out of the ordinary. It's not out of the ordinary to have a cleanup procedure, something that's not major. But I do think it is a story to keep an eye on. The other thing, too, is he's missing reps. You can't be missing reps with your new teammates. So there's a lot that goes into this that I think is, I wouldn't put it like major concern, but it's something to keep an eye on for Notre Dame.
Yeah, it's not something I'd be sounding the alarm bells on. I think that by the time the fall rolls around, he should be healthy. He should be fine. I haven't heard anything that suggests that won't be the case. But I think that what you touched on, Danny, at the end there is really important. Like the reps. This is a new team that he is a part of. And we talked about it with the spring practice a couple weeks ago when we did our preview. I said the only thing I care about with my team in spring practice is just get through without injuries. But in this instance, when you have a transfer QB coming in, you're replacing a couple, your bookend tackles on the offensive line. You've got young receivers. You've kind of got a new offense coming in. There's a whole lot of new in the Notre Dame offense. So for him to be missing these practices and missing these reps, it could lead to a situation, when the season starts, he might be fully healthy, but they might not be fully operational. And I think, once the snaps start and you're playing real games, that's going to matter.
That was one of the reasons why I loved the fit so much, and still do, unless I hear that he's not going to be 100% for the fall. But like Riley Leonard's sack avoidance, which is a stat that kind of travels with the quarterback. I mean, it's relative to the offensive line, but like pressure to sack avoidance is a real stat that quarterbacks seem to own, and it's a fairly stable one. Typically, his was like Anthony Richardson level good, and that's a really important thing, I think, with Notre Dame losing Joe Alt and Blake Fisher. Like those are two good tackles. The one's a lot better than the other, but still, I was like, man, I like this a lot for Notre Dame. His ability to avoid sacks, avoid pressure, a little more QB run game, maybe not put so much pressure on those receivers. If he's not fully healthy, like if he's just kind of mobile, then he's no longer like a top 5 transfer quarterback for me. If there's a silver lining, like they have recruited the position quite well. Like I think Steve Angeli and Kenny Minchie are pretty good options here. Guys who I know we liked coming out, 4-star rated kids who they had to battle some pretty major programs to get. And I mean, they just got CJ Carr as well. So Marcus Freeman and company have done a nice job stacking this room with capable arms, but yet they did go get a transfer, which probably speaks to their opinion of the existing quarterbacks on this roster. But now they're going to be able to see a little bit more of what they have with some of these younger guys running the show, at least for the majority of spring. All right. I don't want to look dumb. I think Greg Sankey might have looked kind of dumb here for his comments and maybe should have waited like a week. So SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey pushing for expansion of the NCAA tournament, talking about he keeps referencing Ole Miss baseball, which is not, in my opinion, a good comparison to what you get in the NCAA tournament. If you guys don't know, Ole Miss baseball won the national championship as the quote-unquote last team in to the NCAA baseball tournament, and he has kept pushing for more teams to be invited to the NCAA basketball tournament, wants to expand it, which I think is just because like you take all these teams and you got to find a way to keep them happy and keep them paid. But man, basketball is just different. And I watch this and I watch Oakland just, bombing. I watch Yale beat Auburn. That's not the best weekend for Sankey to have made those comments, man. Just a little off the mark.
The timing is pretty bad. It's like the argument for expansion is more money, but the argument that they're making is that with just like in football, with the power kind of being focused into fewer conferences than before, they want to give those teams more of a shot in the postseason, like the bubble teams that miss out. But yeah, like you can't say that and then lose to Yale with Auburn, who's a team that many considered a title contender. Then you have your big blue blood program, the most storied basketball program in your conference in Kentucky, losing to Oakland, and not the one in California, just the small school in the state of Michigan. And I think by and large, another thing too, besides the egg on his face of, saying that and then this happening to the SEC, like the argument that we need to get more 22 and 13 teams in the tournament, I think kind of took a huge hit this weekend. Because if you look at the Sweet 16, it's pretty chalky. Like those teams, those bubble teams that were at the bottom outside of NC State are darling Cinderella. It's all chalk. Like if you look at KenPom rankings, 15 of the 16 teams in the Sweet 16 are ranked in the top 23 of KenPom, which is a predictive metric. It is not like the AP poll where we just rank them based on wins and losses. So chalk typically wins out more often than not. So you really don't need those middling power program conferences in there because they're just going to lose in the first 2 rounds anyway most of the time.
And I also, like, if we did expand it, are we putting all these G5s or mid majors, I guess we call them in college hoops, are we putting them in the play-in games and giving like better seeds to these additional SEC and Big Ten teams, or are we sticking those teams in? I feel like we already have a bit of a play-in game. It's called the conference tournaments, right?
Yes.
Which is an argument Tom often makes with the college football playoff. I also, it kind of struck home just how different football is than basketball. In basketball, we do see like experienced teams beating inexperienced teams in a way that, man, in football, you just don't have that quite a bit. People can say like, oh, look how old Michigan was. Mm-hmm. But like Michigan was still a comfortable blue chip ratio team. Like they still have a lot of freaks on that roster. And yeah, they beat a team that had more 4 and 5 stars, but there's still like a certain kind of minimum threshold. In hoops, I mean, you can see some of these teams that don't have a lot of good athletes on there because they play together, because they're 24 years old, because they can shoot the ball. It's like football is just such a height, weight, speed game to me. And like you're pushing somebody out of the way, or you're trying to hold your ground and not be pushed out of the way, and you're hitting people. Like it's a collision sport instead of a contact sport. And so I don't know, that just kind of struck home with me.
Yeah, it was interesting to watch the dynamic unfold in the tournament of the teams that we had heard all along, all season long, were being the best teams, or the best leagues, the Big 12 and SEC, and the teams that were down like the ACC having such a dominant weekend. Teams that really just kind of got or leagues that got completely forgotten about. The Big East, and Dan Hurley, even their commissioner, was out there saying we're going to try to make some changes to this. I don't know what you do though. Like, what do you just get louder and promote yourselves better, during the season? Because I do think that's one thing that benefits the Big 12 and the SEC specifically. I mean, the SEC has been making this push to say, yes, we're a basketball conference too, and it's worked for them. But as far as like the net rankings, and it was something Brad Brownell at Clemson called out, 6 or 8 weeks ago, was saying the Big 12 is manipulating the net rankings, and they're, playing these non-conference cakewalks, blowing them out by 50 points. Like, well, if they're doing it, why don't you too? The ACC plays 20 conference games, so you could adjust things, but they won't. Instead, we'll just keep complaining about it, and there's no solutions. I think everybody up, and it's easy to play the results, and I am guilty of that myself. Trust me, I'm going to have a field day with that if the ACC wins the tournament, and they're already, they've had all these unlikely runs. But if you want change, like, you have to do something. But I don't know what the solution is. Like, you guys know I've wanted to do away with the committee in football. I would love to do away with the committee in basketball. I'd love to do away with any sort of selection process, because it does reek of, I don't want to say like crookedness. I mean, but it does feel icky when you do see commissioners like a Greg Sankey saying, these matchups are bad, or even Tom Izzo, who everyone loves, is saying, well, those are great. We don't love those stories, aren't good. And then you see it happening and you're like, oh, okay, well, everyone loves those, but the coaches don't.
Well, I do think there's a lot of recency bias in play, and a lot of context that is missing from the arguments this year. Like, first of all, the Big East can complain about the process all they want, but the Big East agreed to the process. And it's like everybody came together to figure out how they were going to do this, and then they did it, and then they don't like the results one year, so it's like, now we have to change it. But the fact is, like, with 5 teams winning conference tournaments that weren't expected to in the smaller leagues, 5 bids were quote unquote stolen from what would typically go to the power conference leagues, and those leagues got teams left out. That's why Seton Hall's not in the tournament. It's not because they hate the Big East and the Big 12 gamed the system with the net rankings. It was just Seton Hall was one of the teams cut from the chopping block because their overall resume wasn't as strong. But I know you're going to do it, Danny. And it's funny how, by the way, ACC fans seem to forget that Virginia lost a game, because I keep hearing how the ACC is undefeated in the tournament this year. It's like, I swore I watched Virginia get its butt kicked by Colorado State.
You can't disown them?
No, not yet. They'll be in the Big Ten soon, I'm sure. But just like, I get annoyed when people use tournament results and say that it's proof that a conference is actually good. Like, the NCAA tournament is a one and done noise machine as far as the results are concerned. The 30-game sample size of the regular season is always more meaningful as to what an overall conference strength, not a one and done tournament.
Completely. Do you guys think there's something to the idea that, like, okay, yes, the SEC has so much money, it can buy the quote unquote best players, but is it harder to figure out who the best guys are in hoops, or is it harder to get them to play together? Because I feel like the talent trickling up, we just wouldn't have this happen in college football. You know what I mean? Like the Mountain West is not rising up and beating the SEC champ in college football.
I think if you look to percentage of, and I do think, yes, I think the SEC has spent more on players in the NIL market. It's a reason why they're doing better in basketball, right? I mean, they have better players gravitating towards the league, but the reason why Kentucky doesn't win or doesn't make these deep runs is to what you're saying. Like, I do think it's hard to get these players. You don't have any development, any continuity. And like, percentage wise, if you looked at the percentage of even Florida State, like, who was able to turn around the program through the transfer portal, like, what percentage of the team do you think it actually is? It's probably a relatively small number compared to basketball. Like, NC State's a good example. I think they have 7 transfers. Like, it's almost it's more than half the team, and definitely like the players that are playing. Like, so there's a pretty high turnover. Now they've got a couple players there that have played, a couple years. So there's some development, but I do think it's like this interesting dynamic that's unfolding is you can get all the talent, but there's like a sweet spot where I do think, the hired gun, like the year rental is a little bit riskier in basketball because of the continuity aspect and getting that player to play together with the other ones.
I just think too, there's been such a monumental shift in the sport because of NIL and the transfer portal. Because, like you were talking about, Bud, you don't see the Mountain West champ beating the SEC champ often in football because in a football game, one guy having a bad day can't completely change the outcome of the result. Whereas in basketball, one guy gets hot, anybody can beat anybody at that point, which is what Oakland did to Kentucky because Jack Golke was an absolute flamethrower for 40 minutes, a kid nobody'd heard of 20 minutes before. But I also think that, like, to compare it to what we usually talk about, like you look at Kentucky losing that game and Kentucky failing to succeed in the tournament for a few years now, Michigan State not having as much success in the tournament the last few years, Dabo Swinney effect. John Calipari doesn't use the transfer portal. He just recruits freshmen. And more in this sport, in basketball, seniors. You've got, especially with the COVID year, you've got a bunch of teams full of 23 and 24-year-olds, and Calipari's throwing out a bunch of 18-year-olds. And they might be super talented and they might be NBA lottery picks, but they're going up against men. And they still haven't really learned how to play basketball yet. And John Calipari is an excellent recruiter. I don't know many college football coaches or college basketball coaches or college basketball media would tell you he's a great X's and O's coach. He's just kind of rolling the ball out there and seeing what happens. And you compare that to Nate Oates at Alabama, who I would kind of say is doing the same thing, but he has seniors, kids who have been in the wars plenty of times. So when the going gets tough, they actually know what to do and where to turn it and how to get the job done. So I look at that, and that's what I think of, like, Nick Saban, when the game of college football changed, when he looked at it and said, is this what we want football to be? All right. And then he went out and changed, and the Alabama dynasty kept going. John Calipari is staring at what college basketball currently is and is just shrugging his shoulders like, I don't know what to do. Tom Izzo, I don't know what to do. You just don't do it. What to do is pretty obvious. You just haven't made the change.
I did not think about comping Calipari to Dabo. That's awesome. I in my mentions when I was like, doesn't Kentucky, because people were like, oh, Calipari's washed and all this stuff. And like he only got players back when you had to do NIL under the table. And now that everybody else can do NIL and it's not just shoe company dependent, like the talent is more spread out. But like, doesn't he still get good players? The Dabo comp that's great. I thought about that. Like Kentucky doesn't do transfers.
No, he does do transfers. He just doesn't do it the way other teams are doing it. Like he had Oscar Tshiebwe, who came from West Virginia, who was a stud for them. He was the National Player of the Year. But he surrounds them with a bunch of freshman 5-star guards. Whereas you look at Alabama, that team that they rolled out yesterday, I think it's 4 seniors in their starting lineup. You look at UConn. They're young, but they have transfers. They have high school recruits. It's a blend. Illinois has a bunch of transfers in its lineup, and they're all 23 and 24. Kentucky's a bunch of 18-year-olds. Michigan State, every Big Ten fan in the country could have told you that Michigan State needed to go out in the transfer portal and find a center, like a stretch 4, some big guy who could shoot and rebound. Nah, they didn't do it, and they suffered for it all year in the regular season and in the tournament. They really could have used somebody like that against Armando Bacot on Saturday.
You remember last night, that Grand Canyon game, the George Foster, where the Foster guy's name is for Grand Canyon, he was like at a JUCO in 2018. So this dude is like legitimately a Kansas, physical talent level player, and he's like 24, 25 years old. That was a wild game. Like I miss football, and that game reminded me a lot of football. Like if you're a Bama fan watching that, like Grand Canyon's offense looked how Alabama's offense looked at times last year. It's like, okay, doesn't make a lot of sense. We're just gonna bash you.
There was one college basketball reporter I saw tweet watching the Grand Canyon Alabama game that said, I feel like I'm back at Peach Jam, which is just a high school AAU tournament. Right. And that is basically what that Alabama Grand Canyon game
with no straw. I went to Peach Jam to watch Ben play. It's like a mess. It's like they're just playing all street ball, just like running up. Everyone wants to impress. It's a mess. And it looked like Grand Canyon.
I live bet Alabama every time that game got within a score.
Yeah.
Until the kid for Alabama got hurt. I was like, I don't know enough about basketball to know like how good he is. But I was like, Grand Canyon's offense. I'm still not entirely sure what they were doing. Like if you make it that far, you're probably admitting you don't really run much of an offense. You just do your thing and you get a bunch of 7-footers who swat ball. It actually looked like as a Knoll, I can say this. There were certain Leonard Hamilton teams about 7 or 8 years ago where they would not score, like the offense just was not happening, but they would block every shot. And it was like, okay, cool. Offensive rebounding and free throws. Let's
Bunch of
get it
6'7" guys with 7'5" wingspans. That was Florida State basketball for about 5 years.
Did you guys get a kick out of the basketball media making such a huge deal out of a $33 million buyout for Calipari, which has like a full offset in there?
All right. If Kentucky is unwilling to foot a $33 million buyout, does that not, for once and for all, prove that it is now a football school? Has Mark Stoops not won? If the big basketball school, if they won't spend money to get a new coach in, are you really a basketball school? That's all I'm asking.
This is enough basketball talk for me. We got to hit a break here. I'll see you guys on the flip.
It's time for a little all-star college basketball.
It's the Reese's College All-Star Game, April 5th on CBS Sports Network.
See, we're back. We lose the chat and we take our break. To a more serious topic, Trevor Etienne charged with 4 misdemeanors, including DUI over the weekend. That's the former Florida running back who transferred in the offseason to Georgia. I don't know if you guys are in like the yell or screaming mood, but it is kind of newsworthy when Georgia literally had a staffer die over this, and they're back in the news for it again. Danny, what you got thoughts?
Yeah, it's getting to the point where, and I think we've talked about this a lot, even maybe before Georgia had their specific issues, which do seem to reach like epidemic levels when you're seeing how many different players have been pulled over, how many players have been, have gotten, either excessively speeding, like 100 plus, not 45 and a 30, but like 100 plus, reckless driving, racing. And now you've got, influence, under the influence involved as well. It's a problem. I'm shocked that Kirby hasn't done a better job of nipping this in the bud and taking a statement. And yet when I say that, when is the where has the punishment been outside of the court system when Kirby kicks somebody out that needs to be kicked out, or something is done that's drastic enough that says enough is enough, like something has to stop? So I guess from that standpoint, I am surprised, but I am not surprised without any consequence. Like, you've got access to fast cars, and this is only the stuff we know about. I mean, I'm wondering how many times players have been pulled over and maybe given the, hey man, just slow down. Because there's video of that out there from different cops that have pulled a guy over and told them, hey, we just got your buddy down the street. You guys have to slow down. And they're not. Like, a slap in the wrist isn't going to be something that's going to knock it off. So it's a problem, though, that I don't think is only to Georgia, but the fact that it keeps happening to Georgia players, I think is cause for alarm.
One just point of clarification here. It is a DUI arrest, but Trevor Etienne, right? He doesn't turn 20 until July. So I'm guessing in Georgia, and I know in Florida, like any alcohol in Florida, if you're under 21, like rings up as a DUI. So we don't know, like there's no, I think he was under the 21.
He was under the 21 limit. Yes.
Yeah. So like, I don't know if you can have a technicality DUI. If I was a Georgia fan, that's probably what I would, what I would argue for.
Which I've seen, by the way, they've all pointed that out, which I don't know how at this point, even the most hardcore Georgia fan doesn't realize the seriousness of this and takes a little bit of a different stance as opposed to, hey, let's defend the player like he didn't do anything wrong. No, this is a problem.
And I think too, like, it's also a byproduct of the current situation. And now with NIL, like, players are getting money. And what's an 18, 19, 20-year-old with money going to spend that money on quite often, especially at college? You're going to buy yourself a nice car. So you're seeing players buying cars and taking advantage of the cars. So you can't stop that from happening. But going along to what you were saying, Danny, the only thing that Kirby can really do, because kids are going to be kids, I don't want to boys will be boys, but that's what's going to happen. But you actually have to have consequences for it, like not just a ticket and a court date. dudes have to start missing games for it. Like, you have to send some kind of message, because it has reached the point where, I mean, two people were killed already, and this has not stopped. That was not enough of a deterrent for the rest of the culture in that locker room and the rest of that roster to see maybe we should get our crap together and stop doing this. So you have to figure out something to get it to stop happening, because you've already had one tragedy. There could be another one if you don't do something soon. And this is not, it is a problem at Georgia now, but this could be any program in the country. So it's something I think coaches should be paying attention to. And if you're not already being proactive in addressing it with your players, you should probably start now.
I think Tom's point about the NIL money is a really good one. I see folks on social media say, "Oh, why doesn't Kirby just mandate everybody takes Uber or Lyft?" Right? I mean, these guys, they get these really nice cars and they want to drive them. Like, you know, guys who are young make bad decisions when they drive. Why can't you rent a car by yourself without a crazy down payment until you're 25? You know, why do your insurance rates stay sky high even though you're a legal adult for a couple more years? Like, knowing some guys who run collectives, obviously, the ones they ask for the most are like pretty souped up stuff. So like it's the Jeep Trackhawk, and then it's the new the Durango with the Hemi, which is 710 horsepower. So like that stuff can go get, right? And if you're going to drive that, you're probably not driving that real slow. It's just a sort of thing. I am curious, like during the Mark Richt era, they had tons of guys just rung up on kind of silly, you know, ticky-tack stuff. And I don't know if Athens Police is like a real just kind of, you know, letter of the law. It's kind of crazy to say a letter of the law police department, but
damn police department doing its job.
Yeah. Or is there something about like the way Athens is laid out as a city that makes it either more inviting to drive really fast or more conducive for catching folks driving real fast? I don't really know. But it's just,
I think it's I've driven from Atlanta to Athens. It's not that far. And you know what's a lot better nightlife than Athens? Atlanta. I don't know if that's specifically what they're doing, but it is a night you could go out. And you know it's a lot harder to find an Uber or a Lyft to go that far, and it gets more expensive. So it's not to make an excuse for it, but I do think maybe that is something that's contributing to it. And it's also a road, because I remember when I went there, I think I rented a car, and I think the rental agent that was like, "Where are you going?" I'm like, "Athens." Like, "Be careful. There's a lot of cops on that road." You know, like cops are aware that there's a lot of students, not just football players, that are driving back and forth, that are trying to make good time. And so they kind of set themselves up. So I don't think Kirby hasn't addressed it. Clearly, I'm sure he's yelled at them and he's had meetings and tried to get, but like you said, until there's consequence that makes you want to deter your behavior, I don't think this will be the last arrest that we'll see or last speeding ticket that we'll see. And they're never going to go away altogether. Like, there's something about, like, I remember Mike Shanahan on the Broncos, before we'd have an off week, he would always say, you know, it's a lot cheaper to rent a limo or a party bus than it is to pay for a legal defense for a DUI, you know, whatever, 10 grand or whatever the number was he gave us at the time. It's probably more than that, but he's like, but guys are still knuckleheads. You know, it's not only college players, it's young men with a lot of money that feel invincible. I mean, it's just it's where they are in their life right now. And it's where I am
in my life right now. It doesn't go away.
Right.
We're stupid until we die.
The last thing I had on the type of cars was just, if you're a cop and you see somebody drive like an idiot and they're in like $100,000 Jeep or like a Hellcat Durango, guess what?
Yeah.
You may be more likely to pull them over to have a little chat, right? Like, that's just kind of how this stuff works. That's not a legal thing. That's just flashy car, maybe doing 55 into 30. Let's chat a little bit, buddy. See what's going on today. So I don't know, man. Like, that's all I got on that. I don't know if we need to yell and scream about it the whole time.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, what do? You do sound like the old man yelling at the clouds. I get it, but it is a serious thing, you know?
I just don't want to see anybody else die.
Same.
All right. Now to a lighter topic. Deion Sanders recently said that Shedeur Sanders, his son, there are certain teams that he will not go to in the draft. And he said, quote, "It's going to be an Eli," referencing Eli Manning, when he was going to be drafted by the Chargers, I believe it was back in like the early 2000s, and his dad obviously played NFL for a million years, and they kind of intervened and let it be known that they were not interested in going to the Chargers. I'll start with Danny. Is this a good idea to put this out there this early?
No, absolutely not. I think it's a bad idea to put it out there anytime publicly. I mean, you could do it behind closed doors, let somebody else say it for you, or let the media report it if they happen to find out. But I think this puts an incredible amount of pressure on Shedeur. And I know he said Shiloh. I mean, it's kind of what he does. We're talking about Shedeur. And I think it's one thing to be in question of, is he going to be the top overall pick? And if he's not, let's say he's a top 10, top 15, are you going to hurt your chances of getting drafted to a team that might be able to pay you a lot of more money because you're putting this out there? And the other thing I'm always fascinated by with this, and this is the conversation that's happening right now, because RG3 came out and was like, yeah, way to go, kid. Of course he shouldn't. No one should. Caleb Williams shouldn't want to go to the Bears. Where do you want to go? Like, the teams that need quarterbacks are bad.
You should go to the Chiefs, Danny.
That's what I was going to suggest, that and call him out and be like, yeah, go. Everyone should want to go play for Andy Reid because he's the best. That's where you should try to play. The good teams have quarterbacks that they're happy with. Unless you want to be a third-round pick and be a backup for a few years. Like, I want to know where you want to force your way to. Like, let's see what happens. And by the way, I think for Caleb Williams, they have maybe some of the best weapons and opportunity of any first-round or number one overall pick that we've seen in the last decade. So, like, this whole conversation is really dumb, and it's starting to irritate me that people are saying, yay, player empowerment. Like, before you just say player empowerment, think about what you're saying and see if it makes any sense, because what's coming out of their mouths right now makes none.
I'll start first. RG3, you're an idiot for saying that. The Bears are 7-10. They have Keenan Allen and they have DJ Moore. What other quarterback is entering the NFL as the number one pick, joining a 7-10 team with 2 all-pro receivers on the roster? Go ahead and find the better situation. You just want him to go to Washington. As for Deion, I think Deion can do this. I think this can work. I don't know if I agree with his assessment that Shedeur will be a top 4 pick. But the quarterback class next year, based on how NFL teams feel about him right now, there's a chance he could be a top 4 pick. There's a chance he could be viewed as the top QB in the class. We'll see. There's a long time between now and then. But you look at the situations where this worked. He talked about pooling an Eli. Eli Manning was the son of an NFL quarterback. Eli Manning had a family that had money. Eli Manning was not in a position to where he had to do what he was told to get the contract. He could afford to sit out. He wasn't going to starve. John Elway back in the day did the same thing with the Colts. What did he do? He didn't have a football background, but he went and signed a contract with the New York Yankees and played baseball for a while. He wasn't going to starve until he got his way, so he held out. Shedeur could do the same thing. They've got money. He's not going to starve. If he wants to hold out and do this kind of thing to force his way to a more desirable situation, he can do it. The thing is, this is getting spun as player empowerment, when really this is just some players have more privilege than other players and can do this and get away with it. And if you can, I go for it if it's going to work. I think it can work for them if they really want to do it, though.
I think it's genius on Deion's part.
To say it this early?
Yes.
Yeah.
So check this out. Where do the better teams, the more desirable teams, pick in the draft?
Later.
Right. Do you believe that Shedeur Sanders is going to be a top 4 pick in the NFL draft?
No.
I don't either.
Probably not.
Not based on
I see where you're going.
So just based on how he played,
Jedi mind tricks.
Yeah. He's not a top half of the first round type pick based on how he played in 2023. Now we'll see how he plays in 24. It's entirely possible he gets better. I mean, his pocket movement was definitely a problem at times. Sack to pressure ratio was poor, kind of the opposite of like a Riley Leonard or an Anthony Richardson. Deion's not a dummy. If he doesn't think Shedeur, if he doesn't really believe what he's saying about Shedeur being a top 4 pick, lay the groundwork now for, hey, we're rigging this thing, man. We want to go to the team that fits us better. Because I do think there's a chance he could be in the first round. I don't think he's going to be a top 4 pick, based on his age and abilities. I just kind of said it now, like, hey, this is where we wanted to go.
Do you think the Deion dream scenario is that the Falcons signed Kirk Cousins like what, a 2-year deal? Something like that.
He got
the
more,
Falcons,
but they can
yeah,
probably
but
get
it's
out of it.
basically a 2-year deal. And the Falcons have a good season under Cousins, and then they have a later first-round pick, and then the Falcons can draft Shedeur and then still have Kirk and give Shedeur a year to, grow and learn the offense and blah, 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 whatever words you want to use for it. Do you think that's his dream scenario?
No. I think his dream scenario is that the Cowboys fall apart this season and that they fire Mike McCarthy. Dak Prescott's a bust. And then he goes coach son combo. Jerry, bring us home. And Jerry Jones is maybe one of the ones who would actually do something.
Jerry
like
would
that.
definitely do it.
I think that's the dream scenario for Deion. Like deep down in the heart of, and he could draft Shiloh and probably try to, because did he include Travis Hunter in this conversation? Did he say Travis? I would tell him too.
He said Shedeur and Travis in the top 4. And he said he said something about Shiloh, but like he didn't go as far as to say Shiloh is like a first-round pick. I don't think.
Yeah, and I don't think he was talking about Travis forcing his way to a certain spot as much as he was talking about Shedeur. But Travis could literally be a top 4 pick. So,
yes,
he could. Like, who's going to get drafted higher, Shedeur or Travis Hunter?
I would bet on Travis right now. But the thing is, with the quarterback value, they get overdrafted every single year. So,
do teams ever wake up to that? Because we're starting to see the returns. Because we've probably about 4 or 5 years ago, all of a sudden there was this massive overdrafting of QBs. We're starting to see the returns on these risks that they're taking. Is it just no big deal that it's not that much money? A rookie deal is worth $25-30 million. Just like, or is it, or do you think we'll see a adjustment, or is it, just keep trying?
The first 4 picks in the draft this year could all be quarterbacks.
They probably will, but 2 of them are going to be busts and maybe 3.
Yes. Probably there's more likelihood all 4 of them will be busts than
it's
right,
so
because we keep
valuable
going back
team.
to the class with Trubisky, which was that Pickett. We keep going back to the Pickett class, which was bad because he's already been a bust. But go back to Justin Fields' class. Like, wasn't that Mac Jones? Like, there's already several quarterbacks in that one that aren't panning out the way that people thought they would. And like, we're starting to see multiple years of all these quarterbacks drafted in the first round, and they're not working. So just keep swinging for the fences.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, because you don't need to, like, what's your actual like break even hit rate on taking a first round quarterback? The payoff is so damn good if you get one of these guys who plays as like a top 10 quarterback, and you get like the 2 years where he's still on that rookie deal before you have to renegotiate it. I mean, that's huge. If years 2 and 3 he's playing like a top 10 guy, you get to keep the rest of your roster. That's kind of what the Bears are trying to do right now with Caleb, because the roster is, I think, in many areas kind of win now. So it's not like you need to be hitting on these guys in the first round at an 80% clip. I mean, these are like big time lottery tickets that you're taking. And if you can go, 40 or 50% on them, like the payoff,
I just wonder,
the Bears have flubbed 2 first round quarterbacks in a row, like dramatically. And yet they're still set up in a great position.
I just am surprised that teams haven't adjusted somewhat, because I agree with the philosophy, like build a team, build a roster. If you hit it on that young quarterback, like Jalen Hurts with the Eagles, like he had a phenomenal roster around him on that rookie deal, 2nd round pick. I mean, Brock Purdy's kind of an outlier, but even like Will Levis with the Titans, they're trying to do it with him. And I don't think it's going to work, but if it does, like, isn't that kind of like, man, why are you wasting top picks in the draft when you could get a pretty good, because I don't think the gap is that big on some of these draft picks between the guy that's going to go in the first and the guy that's going to go early second. So why not just wait a little bit and get somebody who really can play with that top 10 pick?
I think there's multiple factors to it. I think we talked about, the rookie deal on a QB is just the most valuable thing you can have in the NFL. And also the QB is the most important position on the field. So teams are always desperate to get one when they need one. So you have to overdraft them. But at the same time, like, history suggests we call them busts if they don't become like Patrick Mahomes or Tom Brady or Peyton Manning. But if you look at the quarterbacks that have gone number 1 overall for the last 20 some odd years, they haven't all been superstars, but they've all typically been average NFL starters. So it's not like you don't get any value out of it. Now, after that, the hit rate becomes far less accurate, because I think you can honestly argue, we talk about quarterback classes, like there's typically one guy in every class that you could feel pretty confident about it. At the very least, hey, you know what? He might not be a superstar, but he's going to be an NFL starter. And I think you typically see that guy go number 1 overall, and then teams take more swings with the picks after that. So I don't think it's going to change until the salary structure of the NFL changes. And I don't see any reason for the NFL to change the salary structure anytime soon.
Yeah, I think you just keep swinging it. Like what team recently has been screwed because they drafted quarterback poorly?
The Giants, but only because they
paid him.
Yeah.
Well, the Bears.
Right. Like, why is Philly maybe
but
in trouble with Hurts?
But the Bears aren't paying Fields for the 5th-year option and extending him. They didn't pay
Right.
Trubisky the 5th-year option and extend them. Like, the mistake is committing big money to the guy who's clearly not going to be the guy, and that's what the Giants did.
If you
Although
pay him,
even sometimes teams, their problem is they're sticking with him because the Eagles paid Wentz too early. The Rams paid Goff too early, but they moved on from those after they realized it pretty quickly. And they might have paid Jalen Hurts too early. And it'll be interesting to see what they do with him after the season.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like I guess the Browns are the one. Like, although Watson had shown a lot of real high level ability, like so it's flopping for them, and they are hurt because of that huge albatross of a contract. But
turns out missing an entire year of football because of your legal problems does not help you get better at playing football.
Who would have thunk it? I'm going to move this up in the rundown because it is draft related. Marvin Harrison Jr. did not work out at Pro Day, and on FanDuel he's still minus 600 to be the first receiver taken. So, how much are we going to yell about how this was a mistake?
Huge mistake. His stock is plummeting. Teams are worrying. They don't know if he has that dog in him, if they care about football. He seems to really like painting. I don't know. A lot of red flags.
Okay.
He should drop to number 9.
Where the Bears can take him with their second pick.
That's what he deserves.
This will be a trend. Right?
For some guys, like I think fast guys run fast. Like that's the thing we say we say in high school, Scott, right? If we see these guys go through all these drills at the Under Armour camps and all these other camps, some of these guys kind of like go tie their shoe off to the side and they try not to run the 40. That's a red flag for me, man. Like fast guys run fast.
So you think this is a red flag? Because you've alluded to this, we've never seen him.
No,
or
because
you're not worried about it.
I don't think it's a red flag for him because he has so much production and we know how he wins. I've never thought of Marvin Harrison Jr. as
a burner.
That guy wins because of his elite speed. He's got huge hands. He uses space exceptionally well. He creates like enough space to get open even against top defensive backs. Like most guys don't have 30 touchdowns and 150 catches and almost 3,000 yards against top competition and have like a ridiculous game until they get a knockout shot against Georgia. Like very few guys that can stand on the table like, yeah, my tape speaks for itself. But he's kind of one of them. And what's the optimal outcome of him running? Like what's a time under no circumstance would he run a time that is better than Neighbors or Brian Thomas? No.
And if he runs
what if he runs slower than a Dunze? It only hurts him.
Yeah. Like if he runs a 4.5 or something, that is plenty fast enough. But it will get compared to the guys who ran 4.2, 4.3, 4.4. And it's like, I don't know. But yeah, no, he has nothing to gain by doing it in front of everybody. He could do it if he wants to do it in individual team workouts just because they want to see it. Cool. But it's one of those situations where, it's like we talked about with Deion and Shedeur. It's not empowerment as much as it's privilege. He's in a position to where he can do it. Other guys aren't, because nobody's going to look at Marvin Harrison and say, I really like him as a football player, but he didn't work out at the pro day. I'm not sure I want to draft him anymore because I didn't see him in tights.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Do we need to hit another break, Mike? Guess we do. Let's hit another break. Boom.
You came down here to tell us that your date is missing.
I did not get ghosted. I think he was taken.
You were dating as a way to face your divorce. Was I really the only thing holding you together, D?
Damn.
Ready or not,
I am in search of a man with whom I had a beautiful connection.
you can't hide.
If anything feels off, we'll go. Off.
Murderer.
Who are you?
Diara.
Gonna find you
And my list of shows to watch just keeps getting longer and longer with these promos. So let's talk a little recruiting. USC had themselves a weekend, guys. They had a big event. Obviously, they've decided that they are committed to playing defense, which not a moment too soon, given the fact that USC is joining the Big Ten. And they flipped 5-star defensive lineman Justice Terry from Georgia. They went back to the state of Georgia. They got 4-star defensive end Isaiah Gibson. And they also got 4-star safety Hilton Stubbs out of the Jacksonville area. So, hello. That's a hell of a way to start your recruiting season off if you're USC. USCfootball.com. I mean, Ryan Abraham just does a tremendous job running that site. It is like the USC site you should go to. They have all the possible coverage that you want to need on that. I kind of asked around this morning, like, what's different here? And a lot of it was like, we'll see, right? We'll see if they hold on to them, but that's what we say about every prospect over the summer. So that's not really like a USC-centric thing. I think the reason why, not skepticism, but acknowledging that it's a marathon, not a sprint, is if you're going like to the state of Georgia to get all those guys. They did have Mykel Williams committed at one time, and now he's a stud for the Dogs. It'll be a fight to the end. But like, do you guys have any reactions to this? Like, does this signal that USC is more serious about playing defense?
Yeah. Like, I mean, this is what you wanted. This is what I've been talking about they had to do all along. They've been soft along the lines of scrimmage the last few years, particularly on defense. So going and getting these guys shows that they're giving a greater emphasis to trying to bring the talent in. And like you said, will they hold on to him? Don't know. A long time between now and signing day. That's just the way it works. But the fact that they've got him, that's a hell of a sign of intent. And I think that, you know this far better than I will, Bud, but when it comes to recruiting, I do feel like there is some sort of momentum in recruiting, in that once you start getting a couple big fish in the boat, other fish want to jump in the boat because there's like an excitement to it. So I think that this is huge for USC, not just be landing top defensive talent, but to be doing so from the state of Georgia.
Yeah.
Yes and yes, agree with you guys. When we had Andrew Ivins on, I remember that was one of the things that we even discussed was how low they were in the rankings. Like, was it a little bit surprising? We're all like, well, let's just see what happens. And then boom, right over the weekend to get these. And I do think this is something that shows, at least, because I mean, the biggest question mark for Lincoln Riley, he's always gone out and got offensive talent, right? That's never been a thing. And I remember him feeling like he had talked a lot about it at Oklahoma. He had talked about it at USC. But now to actually go do it, it doesn't, and we'll see what happens. I get it. We got to see if it actually comes to fruition. But the fact that at least they're focusing their attention to personnel on the defensive side of the ball, I think should be a thing that USC fans look at and say, hallelujah. Thank goodness. Like we're attacking both sides of the ball.
I will note, like, they did get Cam Fountain last year out of Atlanta. He's a high 4-star defensive end, a guy with some real pop to his game. Like, I think a guy that could play early, but also has some nice developmental upside. So it's not crazy for them to go to the state of Georgia and do that. Like, LA's a nice place to be. Obviously, it's a lot less humid than it is in Georgia.
You don't get pulled over nearly as often.
Facts. You will, although like it's hard to go that fast in LA because
traffic.
You're constantly in traffic. It'll be a good opportunity for USC's collectives to be able to show like they're serious down the stretch, right? And maintain all the promises. Trying to think what else here. Oh, yeah. Not a terrible day for Kirby Smart, by the way, I should note, because they did lose Justice Terry to USC. And I don't want to rain on USC parade. Like, you should be damn happy about that, because what's the alternative? Not getting 4 stars and 5 stars? And you need those dudes on defense. Also, the state of California has seen a decrease in the number of large body elite level athletes over the last 15 years. Mm-hmm. And it's been noticeable. Like, I don't know that Pete Carroll would have quite as much success.
It's the diet.
Yeah, exactly. The school lunches must be much healthier out there. I don't know.
It's all vegan and, pescatarian, all that kind of stuff. Lots of tofu. They're not producing linemen like the rest of us in the Midwest and the Southeast who still believe in butter and carbs.
And there's guys out west too. Like, I should note this. Like, there's a lot of families that have moved to Arizona, have moved to Nevada, have moved to Utah. So it's not like, and actually a decent bit have moved to Texas as well. So it's not like they're no longer accessible for USC. But there is some level of, hey, like you're not in the home state anymore. It's a little bit harder of a job, I think, than it used to be. Georgia did have a good day because they went ahead and landed the number 1 overall player in the class of 2026, quarterback Jared Curtis, who has a huge arm. He's like 6'5", 220, moves around pretty damn well. Like, again, it's 2026 rankings, so the guy just finished his sophomore season.
Mm-hmm.
We put the rankings out because the fans like him. This early, I don't think anybody, even like colleges, are never crazy confident in their rankings. But you generally don't see a guy who's number 1 overall, fall that far away, because there are certain dudes who do stand out pretty early, And I would say with Curtis, like the arm is really nice. He throws a high level football. He can move around pretty well, and there's really no questions about the build. So, if you're a Georgia fan, pretty happy with your quarterback recruiting right now, I have to say. Even though you lost Raiola last year.
What is he, 15?
No,
Either that or he's a redshirt. I need to actually look at the birthday on him.
Because
a lot of guys do the red
year.
Thing.
Yeah. It's crazy to me. That's what I'm saying. It's like whenever that pops up, like this, now it's 2026. It's like I'm always thinking of the next year's class, and then when I hear the year after that pop up, I'm like, "What? Really? We're doing?" But it's always a quarterback because you got to get them early. But it is wild to me that this kid hasn't even played a game as a junior yet, but he's already committed to the top program in the country.
He's 20. He's a sophomore.
Oh, yeah.
COVID years. COVID years.
Oh, gosh. Our
damn geometry.
Man, our T-ball team's got to play a game on Wednesday against a bunch of like there's a lot of 6-year-olds on this one team, and it just it ain't gonna be pretty.
They're just physically mature.
Yeah, my son hit a nice ball. Actually, hit it to the fence, so I was like very happy. He hit it off the tee because you get a couple shots at the live pitching, and then they can go to tee for T-ball, which is kind of cool to start him early. And he had a clean double, and he wanted to score. So instead of rounding third, there's not that many umpires in T-ball. We have one, which is crazy to me. I can't believe we have any umpires at all. But he just straight cut third base, like 90-degree angle.
Smart. He's like, hey, the fastest way there is a straight line. He's like,
and
why
this
do I
actually
go
is
there?
a play. Like in high school, you can do this. Like if there's only one umpire, a ball hit to right field, like you can first to third and really cut third, but you can't cut third on a 60-foot base path. He can't cut third by 55 feet. So unfortunately, I turned around and was like, they didn't get me. I was like, that's buddy. All right. So we're in for a hurting on Wednesday, I think, with against these 6-year-olds.
The coolest thing playing baseball that age is like the cool kid was after T-ball when it would be like coach pitch and coaches would be throwing underhand. But then when the coach started throwing overhand to the hitter, you were like, uh-oh, everybody back up 15, 20 feet. This kid's good.
I'm the hitting coach, and like some of these kids don't know what side of the plate they hit from. I've got it on my little roster. I'm like, okay, Noel is a righty. Okay, cool. Let's the side do you hit from. So yeah, real serious.
Listen, he's too young. You can't tell them what hand to use yet. He's got to come to that on his own conclusion.
We're supposed to use this like app to like keep score and track stats. I'm like, what? Like it's T-ball. Like, this is oh dude. Yeah, dead serious. It's insane. I'm like, I'm not downloading an app for this. And if we get selected for All-Stars for T-ball, we're just not going to play.
For like what colleges he uses as a scouting report, it's like, yeah, okay, but what did he hit when he was 7? What was his on-base percentage?
I have no idea.
This kid, data shows that unless they got an OBP of 400 or better from age 11 on, they're just not going to be anything. There's a high bus factor.
We got mercy ruled, and everybody started to walk off the field. I'm like, no, just let the other team finish. Like everybody gets to hit. Like, I don't care if we lose by 10 or 50. Like, no, just they're like, seriously? Like, yeah, hit. Anyway. Pop quiz time, because we got to fill a little bit of airtime. Who's the quarterback of Baylor?
Robert Griffin III.
Who'd they get? Did they get a portal guy?
Daquan Finn.
That's right.
From Toledo. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Although still, I guess, competing with Sawyer Robertson, but I'd assume Finn gets a leg up on that job. I was going through some like preseason scouting notes here. I was like, Daquan Finn, that's right. That's
I'm a big Daquan Finn guy. I'm happy he's going to get a shot at a bigger league.
it's a pretty important year for Dave Aranda there at Baylor.
Huge year.
A couple notes here on receivers, big-bodied guys. Dylan Wright still not full go for TCU. A&M's Noah Thomas, who is a guy that like A&M people were hyping up to me like crazy last year before he had the toe injury. He is practicing, so that's a guy to watch. Rodney Gatson at Cuse is back at practice, and that's like A, awesome for him, and B, awesome for Cuse that they kept him. And then Colby Young, who transferred to UGA from Miami. He was the leading contested catch guy by percentage last year in the ACC. Twitter this morning was telling me that he's killing it at UGA practices. So, yeah, I have some notes there on big-bodied receivers, just to kind of put that in a thing. Anything like from spring practice reports you guys have seen that you're like, interesting or concerning?
I was knee-deep in college basketball all weekend, so no.
Same.
And that's why I'm hosting.
Yeah, see, Danny was bringing the Benergy. I was living in fear of Illinois getting upset again in one of the first 2 rounds of the tournament. And yeah.
It did kind of suck that Oakland had to play NC State. Because like those were the 2 Cinderellas that I think everybody was rooting for. And I was like, yeah, go Ben, go who's the big dude for NC State?
DJ Burns.
Like go DJ.
Big
And then
man.
at the same time I was like, go
Jack Goldak. Yeah, the dude for them. Do you think so? I saw him getting multiple NIL deals. Tax company and Buffalo Wild Wings, TurboTax and Wild Wings. Is that money well spent? Because now he's off. Like now that he loses, he's done. So you got like maybe 48 hours of exposure from that ad.
Yeah, but at least we'll get a new TurboTax ad over the next 2 weeks instead of the same 15 ads we've seen for over and over again.
You think they're going to shoot a commercial with him? I don't know if like they just did the little thing in his ballroom.
Oh, I 100% think they should do a commercial with him because I mean, like they've been doing, like you see, they've had Armando Bacot, North Carolina's forward, doing like, now that I'm getting paid, I need to learn how to do my taxes and blah blah blah. I think they should 100% like try to sell or jump on that opportunity, just even if it's just for the rest of the tournament, because everybody who's watching these games is going to know who he is and they're going to be in on the joke.
What do you think he got from it?
That's what I was wondering too. Yeah. And I think it's
no leverage.
What do you think he got? I think it's between 10 and 50, but I have no idea where like that falls. Do you think it's more 25. Than 50?
I was going to say like 50, just because like if you're TurboTax and the kid happened to have won the second round game, you don't want it to come out that you were like crazy cheap with him, I guess. Right. So like 50 is nothing for you to run a national television commercial, right? Like 50, whatever, like that's not a collective. That's like a real brand. And he doesn't have leverage though, to get more than 50, because like we talk about these players and how I think like a players union in college football would kind of get whipped because everybody is extremely time limited, because you can't, at least for now, nobody's playing college football for like more than 5 years for the most part. This kid has like a 48-hour window of relevancy, maybe.
The leverage he has. Who is it? Intuit. Who are the other quick? Like who else does he go to for the tax companies? I don't know if they line it up.
Tax, what's the yellow one?
And they could go find a DJ Burns. I mean, they could go find another, darling of the tournament to see if they'll do it. So he does. You're right. He doesn't have a lot of leverage.
Because Golke looks like an accountant, so you can do the commercial where it's just, now that my college career is over, it's time for me to get a job. I'm working for H&R Block, blah, I'm an accountant now.
Yeah.
Did you see the mom of the Bama player who has like a bedazzled basketball, and she like fake goes through his free throw routine every time.
I did see that. She does it exactly the same way. Yeah.
What is the like most ridiculous warm-up activity that a mom could like simulate in the stands? Like walk-up music, like bat twirl, like take a couple like practice swings,
or I mean, like in football, like the quarterback, like JJ McCarthy and Harbaugh would like bang heads and he'd go on his shoulder pad. You could see that, like two moms going at it, just like slapping each other across the face.
Mom throws on crazy hockey gloves and like taps them. And
that's what we need. We need mom fights in the stands.
All right, you know what? this wasn't a total disaster. It's noon. Enjoy it.
Enjoy prison, Chip. We don't need you.
Tomorrow
we